Before I get into the video, I want to lay out some of the rules that I had made for this challenge, just for the people that haven't seen any of the previous videos. The major rule I would be using is I would only be doing maps that took 12 hours or less, and this is because I started this challenge 4 months before the release of Black Ops 6, and doing maps like Town or Call of the Dead that take 70 plus hours, not including any restarts, isn't very reasonable for a challenge of this length. Also, regardless of those maps, there was still 58 maps for me to get to round 100 on, and this is also excluding any objective based maps because I wanted to build up kind of some hype for the return of round based with Black Ops 6. And finally, I also wouldn't be doing any Dead Ops Arcade, as I consider it its own separate game mode. And yeah, that's pretty much it, so let's get into the video. I feel like Cold War is probably one of the more popular modes of zombies that we've had over the years, and I can see how it's fun from like a casual perspective, but for high rounds it was very boring and very similar to BO4, to be completely honest, just a faster version of it. Going back and playing it every now and then isn't that bad though, and I think it's kind of grown on me a little bit, especially since there are different ways to play the game if I wanted to. But since the goal here was to just get to round 100 and be over and done with, that's exactly what I did. So to start us off, we've got Die Machine, and because I'd managed to do every Easter egg on Cold War, I managed to start myself off with a purple rarity weapon. And so to start things off, I would go ahead and give myself a purple M16, and then after round 1 or 2, I went ahead and went into the penthouse and I switched on Rampage Inducer. Now for those of you who don't know, Rampage Inducer basically speeds up the spawns of the zombies and the speed of the zombies themselves to make them like round 20 spawn rate and like round 55 speed. And in my opinion, this makes Black Ops Cold War have the most entertaining and the hardest early round gameplay that you could possibly ask for. But after about 5 minutes or so, I was already on round 10, and it was time for me to just go ahead and go down into the facility and activate power. And after switching on the power, the game then wanted me to check out an anomaly, which I did. And then it gave me directions to where the Pack-a-Punch piece is that I needed in order to unlock Pack-a-Punch. So I went ahead and did that. And then I also went ahead and bought myself some armor. There were about 3 different currencies in Cold War. But these are points, which you use for like buying ammo, Pack-a-Punching, and just the normal stuff like buying weapons. Then you've got salvage, common salvage that is. Then you've got uncommon salvage even, and this allows you to pretty much buy like any armor. You can refill your armor for 250, you can get it to level 2 armor for like, I think it's 1000 salvage and then 2000 or somewhere along those lines. And then you can also buy like tactical grenades and hand grenades. And then you have what's known as rare salvage, and rare salvage isn't as rare as you might think it is, and you can use this in order to buy support things like a chopper gunner or an RCXD or a war machine, flamethrower, death machine, that kind of good stuff. And you can get yourself some tier 3 armor, which will then need to be repaired with just regular uncommon salvage. But I decided in this game I was going to try the new speedrun strategy that got created not too long ago. And this strategy requires the Ring of Fire, which I was going to use anyway, and the gas version of the Die Shockwave. And in order to get this Die Shockwave, what I needed to do first was kill a Megaton, and the Megaton drops some sort of key card. I then need to go underground into this kind of area and use the key card here in order to unlock some kind of scanner for the Die Shockwave, and then I would need to take this to the machine that's close to spawn, that's locked behind a door, and activate this machine at the side. And what will happen is it will suck up some zombies, and then after it sucks up some zombies, you can activate the gun from behind the door, and it will explode the door, and you can go and pick up the die shockwave. And in order to upgrade this to the gas die, what I had to do is shoot out some of the bullets so I could use the suck function of the die shockwave in order to get this gas canister from on top of one of the roofs, or close to one of the roofs. Then after picking it up, I needed to place it down close to where I initially got the scanner for the die shockwave, and place this canister down here, ready for a plague hound round. Then once I got one of these rounds, I would then kill a plague hound next to the canister. The canister would then suck up the gas from the plague hound, and then I had to take the canister and put it on top of this box. And finally, I think I just had to shoot it with the die shockwave, and then I could interact with the box, and it would switch the die shockwave into the gas die version. And thankfully, you can actually revert this back at any point in the game by going to the same box that you got the variant from, and it will give you back the regular version of the die shockwave. And so let's talk a little bit about this damage system that's in place here. So the way the damage works from the zombies hitting you is, if you have no armor, you will be dealt a set amount of damage. I think before round 10 it's 30 damage. Before round 50, like between rounds 10 and 50 or something, it's 50 damage is what you'll take. At some point, maybe between 30 and 50, it's like 75, but I can't be too sure because I always have armor at this point. But I can tell you for a fact that from like rounds 55 onwards, you will take 90 hits of damage whenever you don't have armor. So this means in the higher rounds from 55 onwards, you will be a 3-hit down if you do not have any armor. However, if you do have armor, then you will only take a percentage of that damage, and I don't know what it is on the earlier rounds. It's probably something like 19. But from rounds 55 onwards, you will only take 31 damage from hits from zombies. And this means it will take 9 hits before you actually take a down. But again, that's provided you have armor. If you run out of armor, you will die very, very quickly. But anyway, once I'd gotten my die shockwave upgraded to the gas die, I would go ahead and wait until I had enough points in order to upgrade it to the tier 3 version. This will basically increase the damage it does. And then I went ahead and bought the rest of my perks from the Wonder Fizz machine, which is readily available from rounds 20 onwards. Before then, you would have to go into the Dark Ether in order to go to the machine. But after that, you can just go to it whenever. And this is where the new strategy comes in, because what you would want to do is when you have your Ring of Fire active, you want to shoot the back spawn with the gas die, the spawn in front of you, and the spawn to the left of you. And you know, things were going decently well until about round 55 when max spawns hit. Because although this strategy is insanely fast, it is actually quite risky, especially for someone who's never done the strat before and has never practiced it. And the fact I was only going to round 100, after taking about 5 or 6 downs, I thought it would have been best for me to switch back to the die shockwave. And so on about round 70, that's what I did. I switched back to the regular die shockwave, and this was still insanely fast. And in order to do this, you just shoot forwards a couple of times, and then when you're on the Ring of Fire, when you've got it available, you will then use it, suck them up in order to get your ammo back. And then when you're outside of the Ring of Fire, you will then just go ahead and shoot the die shockwave in front of you, and make sure you're just a little bit further back so that you can get the side spawn, so you don't get cut off by them. And yeah, that's all there is to it. And rounds were taking like 50 seconds to a minute in like the 80s and 90s. And then every like, what, 7 to 9 rounds or something, you get a Plague Hound round. And what you want to do is stand by this post, as this will give you the fastest spawns for those rounds. And the dog rounds take like 30 seconds, over really quickly. And before I knew it, it was round 100. It took me like, what, an hour and 40 minutes or something? Really, really fast. And it was time for me to go onto my least favorite Cold War Zombies map, Firebase Z. So, before I get into Firebase Z, it's not like it's the worst map I've ever played. It's just lacking in a lot of the departments that make a good map, in my opinion. To start off, the map doesn't feel like a zombies map. Like, D-Machine wasn't the best, but it had some kind of zombie elements and like a zombie feel. But this map basically feels like what Liberty Balls is going to feel like for a lot of people, which is, you know, a multiplayer map made into a zombies map. So we start off in this pretty big open area for the first room, and I'll once again be switching on the Rampage Inducer in order for those fast early rounds. And let me tell you, I really do struggle with Rampage Inducer on. But once I've got enough points to exit the first room, I'll be making my way upstairs to the teleporter and teleporting through to the kind of main area of the teleported place, I guess. And at this point, I basically activate the challenge machine in order to do as many challenges as I can to get to Legendary. And once I'm at Legendary, I would then be seeing what reward I got. Because what I'm going to be looking for is the wonder weapon on the map, which is the Ray K. And luckily, after my first Legendary thing here, I managed to get the Ray K. And so I just started making my way around the map, switching like all the power switches on, like the generators and stuff. And then it was time for me to start running the early round strategy a little bit, which is also the late round strategy that I ran, which is just camping in Motor Pool. So I'd basically been sitting by this car that's on fire and using death machines, which I bought with my rare salvage, or the Ray K, and I'd stay here till like the mid-20s. And at that point, I would make my way down to the Pack-a-Punch machine, which is in the spawn room, and I would also be getting my perks from the Wonder Fizz machine. Yeah, I'd triple pack my Ray K, and I would also buy the stoner that was on the wall, and this was going to be needed in order to take out the order. Thankfully, the first special round I got didn't have an order, probably because it was before round 30, and it just had regular zombies to deal with. And these special rounds, which contain the order, happen every 10 to 11 rounds, and honestly, it's probably a good job they come every 10 or 11, because these rounds are pretty long. Because it's one of those kind of bosses that the later on in the game you go, the more damage it kind of takes. And so, like, on round 50 it takes forever to kill him, but by round 90 it's like 30 seconds and he's completely dead. And even later on he'll probably take more and more damage, and you can probably kill him in like 10 to 20 bullets or something. But anyway, for those of you who have played this map before, you'll know that Motor Pool isn't the kind of standard strategy, and this is actually a strategy that I made day 1 or day 2, and it was actually a little bit faster than Weapons Lab, so this is what you'd use for like the 100 speedrun and stuff. But because I was so out of practice, I ended up taking quite a few downs doing this, and it kind of made me wish I'd have just played Weapons Lab instead. But let me tell you a little bit more about the strategy. So yes, I'd be playing by this car, but what I'd be wanting to do is use the 2 different fire modes of the Ray K. And if you've ever used the Mark III before or the Ray K, you'll know how this works. You shoot the ult fire mode in order to place an orb on the ground, and then I would shoot into it with the regular fire mode, and this would create an explosion to happen, which would kill all the zombies around it. So I would be using this, and then whenever my Ring of Fire was available, I would basically be doing the same thing, only making sure I kill the Mimics and the Manglers. And after 95 rounds of doing that, I decided to go into the spawn room and show off a little bit of a different strategy. Now, I'm pretty sure this strategy isn't as fast as the other one, but it's still pretty fast nonetheless and a lot safer, but it uses up your resources like no tomorrow. Because what you want to do is constantly buy these Casimir devices, basically Gersh grenades, and you place them on the ground, they'll kill pretty much everything, and you want to activate your Ring of Fire whenever you have it so you can kill all the manglers and mimics. And then you just keep buying these Casimirs off of the workbench. You will eventually lose out on salvage, but it's kind of worth it, especially if I'm only going to round 100, you know. So yeah, I just did that for the last 5 rounds and managed to get to round 100 in a little over 2 hours. Mauer the Totem was up next, and this is a map I'd actually been really looking forward to ever since I watched the round 100 speedrun using this pretty insane strategy. Now, all in all, I've got to say, at least for me, using and playing these strategies, I don't really think it saved that much time for me, but it was still pretty fun nonetheless. And it's really cool to see this map actually have 3 different strategies now. I know back when I played it still had 2, but to have 3 different strategies on a Cold War map is actually really cool. And the best thing about this strat is there was practically no setup for it. I'd be loading into the match with an M79, and then I would basically be buying like an M16 off the wall or something just for the early game, and then I'd camp in the power room like normal till probably round 7 or 8. I probably should have done it to round 11 so I could buy a death machine and stuff, because I was going to need it for the early game, but it is what it is. Now, I will say this early game was made very painfully slow for me because I didn't end up staying in the power room for long enough, and I didn't end up getting a death machine to help me clear out these rounds. So it was pretty hard and pretty rough to just play. I ended up having to kill the disciple that spawned in, trying to use like a grenade and stuff, and the green M16, and it was just pretty rough all around. But over the course of the next 10 rounds, I managed to get some more perks and pack-a-punch my M79 to the 2nd tier. And at this point, things were going a little bit faster, because what this strategy consisted of is playing at this insanely fast spawn rate where there's, I think, 3 or 4 different spawn zones, and you basically use the Ring of Fire whenever you have it and spam the fuck out of these spawns. And I think some of my rounds in the 70s or 80s lasted 30 seconds long. And what I decided to do as well when I didn't have my Ring of Fire, I would just get a war machine, shoot it in there like 2 bullets to get my Ring of Fire, and then spam my Ring of Fire again. And this was really cool, and it took me about an hour and 40 minutes in order to get to 100 doing this. There really isn't much to say because, like, there are Panzers or Krasny Soldats on this map, but you just obliterate them with the Ring of Fire and the M79, or if you don't have that, you've got Semtexes you can use. All that kind of stuff. Everything just dies immediately, including the disciples that are behind you and the manglers. You just turn momentarily when you're in the Ring of Fire and you just kill them. And then you do have Tormentor rounds, which I think is every like 5 to 7 rounds. Basically another free max ammo round. I don't think it really matters where you play. But yeah, I'd just get a war machine or Semtexes, use them. I would then use my Ring of Fire and just kill everything around me. And now it was finally time for the final Cold War Zombies map, which is Forsaken. If I'm being perfectly honest, I think Forsaken was probably the easiest map I actually completed for this 100s challenge. And it's probably because it was the only map on Cold War that I'd originally done like the easiest strategy on. Well, it's not the easiest, but it's definitely the one I was most familiar with. So we'll start off with the early rounds. Now, although there is Rampage Inducer, there's basically no point in doing it. It just makes things a bit harder for you. It doesn't make them faster. And that's because rounds still transition the same as if you were on Rampage Inducer, even without having Rampage Inducer on. That's just the way they made the map. And so on this, I would be staying in the spawn room until about round 25. And the way you do this is just by buying a death machine past like round 10. And this allows you to just kill all the zombies and get more rare salvage from the zombies, allowing you to get more death machines because you won't really need to get another one before like round 15, I'd say. And in order to deal with the abominations, I would quite simply use the death machine on them. This was very simple to do. and within about 15 minutes I'd be on like around 27, 28, and then I'd just leave the spawn room and begin my setup because I had enough points to get everything I needed. So first things first, after I left the portal through the spawn room, I'll then make my way through to the pizza room. This is a little secret room that you've got to use your ether shroud into, and then you'll find Ronald Reagan there. Then I'd just kill him and pretty much play the rest of the round there. And once I'd done that, I would then move on to the next area. I would then be picking up these 4 different parts in order to repair the teleporter in order to get to the next area, and these are in the 4 separate buildings around the area. And finally, once I'd repaired the teleporter, I would go through it and make my way through to the end of that area, and this is where an abomination spawns in, and I just killed him with, I think it was a death machine again, and that was pretty much it. I was now able to go up into the room and press this button, which allowed me to access the other area that was in the previous one I just came from. This has the Wonder Fizz in it, which is where I went back to get all my perks. And then on top of this, I also decided to triple pack my M79 because that's the only weapon I would be using alongside the score streaks. So from rounds 30 onwards, what I would have is the M79 Pack-a-Punched, and I would sit in the room where I killed Ronald Reagan, shoot the M79, use my Ring of Fire, throw some Semtexes and stuff like that, use a War Machine from like rounds 50, 60 onwards because that was actually faster than using the Death Machine. And that was pretty much it. That's how I got to round 100 on this map. Oh, and when the abominations came in, I would use the Ring of Fire and shoot them with a Death Machine, or I'd throw like Semtexes at them, use the M79, just anything really. Yeah, that's it. But before I end off on Cold War, I would just like to say that this game can become the easiest game that you've ever played if you just change up the strategies a little bit. And this is thanks to something they added in later on, which is the RCXD score streak. And this is a problem that Cold War had, and I really hope that Black Ops 6 doesn't have, is that what you can do with this RCXD is you can leave it on the ground for about 20 seconds before it will explode on its own, and the RCXD has this like dark ether pulse that just kills all the zombies around it. And if you just don't move the RCXD like at all after you place it down, it won't explode. And the problem with this is you can still get rare salvage from zombies getting killed by the RCXD. Which means after you let it go for the full 20 seconds, you can then run around, pick all the salvage up, throw a decoy grenade on the ground, buy more decoys and buy an RCXD, put another RCXD on the ground, and you will have made salvage. That's right, you make more salvage from doing this than you lose, even though you have to buy it for like, I think it's either 50 or 100 salvage. And another worst part is, it's like the most stable strategy to do on D-Machine. So yeah, I just really hope that they fix this issue in Black Ops 6 just to make the game a little bit more challenging, even though I know it's not going to be insanely challenging or anything. I already prepared myself for that. But just to make it so that you have to vary in the strategy you do at least a little bit. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of Cold War. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to drop a like, subscribe for more content like this, and I will see you guys in the final video.